Hi everyone, so welcome to the first roundtable of the day that is going to be roundtable 1 and 2 together. So we're going to be talking about GRID, as we've already been talking about this morning. I think we've got Paul Elliott on video who needs to go to a meeting at 10, so we'll probably go straight to him if he is there. Have we? Perhaps not. Okay, we'll get started and then let me know if he joins and we'll cut to him straight away. So in terms of obviously diversity and inclusion, there's no doubt that it's super important, but I'd be interested, and we can use this as a sort of intro to what you each do as well, how you see this as an important part of your organisation and how you work with it. If we start with you, Rafi.
Thank you very much. So my involvement really in this area is primarily on the SIGA Standing Committee for Gender, Race, Inclusion and Diversity, which I think is a hugely important movement, not only within sports, but also within the industries that link off sports as well. I include the one that I work in, which is anti-match fixing work. And I think it's paramount that we stay on top of these issues. And as I think we'll probably hear on this panel, there are certain things that we just take as the norm. Things haven't really changed very much over the years. I think it's important to keep those issues at the forefront.
Absolutely. I think we have got Paul on Zoom now, so we'll just cut to him if we have. No?
Hello, good morning everyone.
Oh, morning Paul, how are you? On the move, and looks like you might have frozen. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. So I don't know if you heard. Go on.
No, I'm perfect. I'm good. I can hear you loud and clear.
I think we're going to have difficulty hearing you potentially, but let's just try one more time. Did you hear the question? So the importance of diversity and inclusion within your particular organisational remit?
Absolutely. It's as far as I'm concerned, equality, diversity, and inclusion. I call it equality, equity. In addition to that, has got to be in my view, in every entity, in every football club, in every stakeholder structure, it's got to be key and central in their organisational DNA.
Great. And what sort of initiatives are you working on within the FA to be able to support that?
Well, there's been a lot of good work, positive action programs going on, but one of the two biggest key initiatives has been the Football Leadership Diversity Code, because the FA, they've done some excellent work historically, but it's been I suppose it's fair to say it's not been in a cogent, joined up fashion. So I worked with my colleagues to create this Football Leadership Diversity Code, which is actually holding the organisation to account, but also the stakeholders, where we've got targets across gender, ethnicity, ethnic diversity, training, education, unconscious bias training. So there's a myriad of positive initiatives to create greater diversity. And I think that this was, we created this during COVID, and obviously another issue in COVID where many people were talking about the institutional, structural, systemic and systematic issues of race, not just within football, but obviously within society. And I've always taken the view that whilst you've got racism in society, it'll always be prevalent in football. But I can say unequivocally, some of the excellent work now that the football's taken the lead, particularly the FA. I think we've got strong leadership in our new chair, Debbie Hewitt, and we recognise, I think, that we have to work in a collegiate, collaborative way. And I think there's a number of initiatives that, particularly with the Football Leadership Diversity Code, it's in its embryonic stage, but I really feel it's the start of a massive journey, where, as I said in my opening line, where there's such a strong focus on equality, diversity, and inclusion, so we're talking about, from grassroots football in boards, councils, committees, right the way through to the main board. So that leadership and setting that example, I think, has really galvanised English football.
Great. And I think you're right in terms of the society element as well. SIGA often use the phrase about if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think that's where all sporting organisations have got a real opportunity to sort of go ahead of society and give an opportunity to reflect that.
Yes, Exactly, I agree with that. And especially when you look at football, the power of football, you've got 4.6 billion people. That's 60% of the global audience that watch the Premier League annually. You know, that's in 195 countries. So what we're saying is, you know, black players, for example, make up close to 45% composition of football in this country. That also has to be reflected in the coaching, in the senior leadership positions, middle management, so people can transition from the game into those areas. But I think now there's more of a focus than ever before. So I'm, you know, humbly, respectfully optimistic for the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Aaron, if we move to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm Aaron Kang. I'm the CEO of Sporting Equals, and we're a not-for-profit organisation that works to increase participation of ethnically diverse communities across the UK in particular. But what we've realised over the years is the fact that the opportunities, access to the information, the benefits aren't always getting to those communities. It might be socioeconomic reasons, because the facilities aren't there, or it might be that people just don't get them in the organisations that are out there. And so we work a lot with governing bodies in the UK to try and get them to understand better the challenges and barriers facing specific communities who come from a different ethnically diverse backgrounds. And so it's very important to understand that. Now, the best way you can do that is to have people who are ethnically diverse within your organizations, who are the decision makers and people who are creating the interventions. If you've got that, then you've got a better understanding of the challenges already facing the communities that you've come from. If you don't, and the profile is very much of a single race, gender, etc., then what you have are people on a boardroom or people in a senior management team who all think alike. And if you've got people thinking like that, they all think they've got it right because they're all from very similar backgrounds. So diversity is not just about ethnicity or gender, it's about your life experiences, where you've come from, different languages, cultures, education, whether you're educated in the Caribbean or educated in Southeast Asia, wherever it is. Those are very important for the communities across the countries. So on that basis, for Sporting Equals, what we want to do is increase participation of sport and physical activity for people's mental health and health benefits. But what we've realised over the years is it's not going to happen unless we get the governing bodies of sport in the UK really understanding that and coming out with the intervention. And Paul Elliott's mentioned some of those already, which are very important to make a change. So I'm really grateful for SIGA to lead the way in this internationally around leadership and governance and understanding the importance of diversity from gender, race and disability in particular, because if you don't have that in the decision-making room, if you don't have that in the boardrooms, then nothing is going to change for the individuals on the ground.
And you mentioned obviously about making sure that teams within organisations are diverse. Have you got any advice for people watching in terms of where should they be going to make sure that the right people are even seeing those like job ads and that kind of thing? How do you sort of unlock that talent?
In a way, a lot of it is positive action. And we're not asking somebody to do anything illegally and start sending it to one specific black organisation, for example. What we're saying is we've got to open it up to everybody. So yes, you might be putting it on sports websites that you've always done as a sports organisation, but now you need to go a bit further out and link into organisations such as Sporting Equals who have their own vacancy pages already. So, and that's where many ethnically diverse communities are going to go to. But there's many others. There's ethnic media out there who could really support and promote. But it's not just the vacancy itself. You've got to show yourself that you're an inclusive organisation. Now, if you're not ethnically diverse at senior management or board level, then you've got to promote a lot more the interventions that you're putting in place, like the FA are doing, their leadership code, etc. You do need to then show the fact that you are making a change. And if the communities out there don't see diversity on your board, diversity in your senior management, or even diversity in your workforce, then you do question whether it's welcoming. And if it's not welcome, why are you going to apply? Yeah. Why go into a place where you feel that you're going to get discriminated against on the basis of race, gender, disability, etc.? You might already start getting those perceptions. The organisation might not be discriminatory, but there's a perception. Sometimes perception is reality.
Yeah. We've got amazing people on the panel, so we'll go to a video one now. So Yath from Sky Sports, commercial director there. Have we got Yath?
The easiest way to get into the meditative state is to begin
and they're off
by listening.
In dark times for us all, they have re-emerged as by far football's brightest light. The undisputed lightweight champion of the world.
Cricket's newest and most ambitious format yet.
You get Imran Khan here! What a special hat-trick that is!
And it's the opening goal of the brand new WSL season.
And then hopefully use the platform to do more in the future.
Take a knee.
Take the knee.
Take a knee to fight all form of discrimination.
You know, if you play for England, we'll get a sniper and shoot you, and we'll also kill your family. I'm receiving this 2-3 days before I go out to play a test match.
No one's ever listened. No one's ever cared to go and do anything about it.
Black Lives Matter.
Gary, what would you say now you've had time to consider what this European Breakaway League is all about?
It's an absolute disgrace. Everybody's got to come behind this. Pundits for BBC, ITV, BT Sport, forget allegiances.
Hate and online abuse ruins lives.
If we see it in our social feeds, we will call it out.
I think it's one of the most special moments this women's game's seen in this country for forever. To be on Sky Sports, to have this visibility, this platform.
I am delighted that Sky Sports' coverage of tonight's event has received Albert certification.
As you hear sounds coming up in your head, you simply listen to them as part of the general noise going on, and soon you will find
That's massive!
that the so-called outside world and the so-called inside world come together, come together, come together, come together, come together.
Brentford
they are a happening.
Are in the Premier League!
And everything is simply a happening.
Do you know what? That is what dreams are made of.
And all you're doing is watching it.
The only way I felt I could beat it was just to play.
And I'm pleased the word racist appears in that report now.
Hate won't win.
I came in today and I had a box of paracetamol, a box of diolite in my locker. I think someone's sending me a message that the next few days is going to be messy.
Manchester United have signed Cristiano Ronaldo. It has been confirmed.
That's for all the kids out there who dream the impossible. You can do it too, man. I believe in you guys. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support.
That's absolutely outstanding. They fought back and then dominated.
And England back in the game.
Your generosity, oh my goodness, 1.2 mil.
We're unbelievably grateful to everyone who's helped us out.
It's so nice, it's so nice.
Great video. Welcome, Yath. There's obviously lots going on at Sky, but I'm sure it's not necessarily been easy in terms of all the work that you've had to do within the structure of the organisation and commercially. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, that was quite a long video, wasn't it, in the end? That was basically something we put together, to be honest, post George Floyd's death, where we realised, we need to be doing more as a broadcaster that tens of millions of people watch every day, to use our voice to essentially push forward societal change. And clearly the topic of this conversation is around diversity and inclusion, and that is something that we've just had at the heart of what we've been trying to do for the last several years, both in terms of our coverage, so ensuring that women's sport is shown on Sky Sports and given the Sky Sports treatment. I think the best example of that is the WSL. Also in terms of the people that we put on screen, looking to be more representative of the sports that we're covering. and ensuring that there's greater diversity there. You see that sort of particularly in our cricket coverage in Formula One, where we've introduced Naomi Schiff, who's never driven an F1 car before and was a bit of a risk to put in as one of our key pundits, but has been absolutely fantastic and has brought in a new, younger audience. Also, crucially, looking to support financially as well. So not many people know this, but we're the biggest investors in women's sport in Europe. And we're doing that because we want to help grow these female sports competitions to be hopefully in future at the same level as the men's game. And then finally, we're looking to work with the industry, partnering with the industry where we can to try and drive through the change we want to see. So we work with the BBC, you saw with the Hate Won't Win initiative, but we also partnered with the likes of the Women's Sport Collective, with Kick It Out, which has probably been the one that's been most visible in the UK around ending discrimination in football. So there's a lot we're doing. And the reason we're doing this is fundamentally, obviously, it's the right thing to do, but also we believe, as a big commercial entity, that it's good for business, that will bring in more audiences from different backgrounds, and that hopefully that will mean that we're more successful as well.
And do you think that you've seen a change in that in terms of the sort of business case of investing in women's sport or investing, I think you support Kick It Out with funds and stuff as well. Has that been quite an easy thing to push through in terms of being able to demonstrate that it's going to grow audiences, or has that been a battle?
I think we're definitely taking a long-term view and know that we're okay with potentially making a loss on certain rights in the short term because we want to try and grow them in the long term. WSL is an example of that, where we've invested more than has ever happened before in that competition. We're not yet seeing that fully deliver for us commercially, but we've already seen a 3x increase in viewing when it was on BT Sport the season before to coming on Sky Sports. We're getting a lot more people watching it, and we hope that in the years to come, it will then be something that can drive, for us, subscriptions. With Kick It Out, I think this is part of a wider Sky play to be supporting organisations that are, doing the important work and looking to offer them not only sort of financial support, but crucially the support of the marketing machine that is Sky. And so we've been doing lots with them over the last couple of years, and there's more to come.
And you mentioned obviously working with the industry in terms of BBC entertainment side of it. Changing the sort of makeup of commentator teams, pundit teams in different sports. Are you working with any of the federations or leagues to look at perhaps players that are coming up towards retirement and how they could be trained and ready to do that sort of work?
Yeah, we sort of do a lot of this sort of behind the scenes. So we do it with all of our sports. I think with a lot of it, there are certain athletes that you want to sort of try and bring on. But I think crucially, when we talk about having more diversity on screen, it's not just about the elite athletes. How can we find ways for journalists to come in, for people who have gone through non-traditional backgrounds to try and get into the media space and get them in? So you'll start to see, you are seeing already on Sky, and you're starting to see more people from different backgrounds who haven't just won the Premier League title 5 times or won multiple Formula One World Championships coming onto our screens, particularly digitally and socially, where we can experiment a bit more initially, but also crucial on the linear side as well. And that means that you hear female commentators on football coverage, that you have a lead female pundit for our Formula One coverage, that you have for many years lead commentators on our cricket coverage, etc.
Great. So we'll move back to the stage and back to another federation point of view now with you, Denzo. What sort of things are you looking to do as a federation to be able to sort of support everybody within your sports?
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. Yes, I work with the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation, and I've been there since 2014. And we have been working to develop and create more diversity within the organisation, especially at the board level. And one of the things that was one of the messages that was fed back to me by one of our sponsors was that the federation was too Eurocentric, needed to be more diverse, which is something that I recognised in any case. And we started the process of making it more diverse by changing the statutes that allowed people from or representation from regions outside of Europe. So within our statutes, we have to have a representative from Oceania, Asia, Africa, Pan America, as well as Europe. So that has gone a long way to making the board a lot more diverse. And then we've gone further by trying to encourage a better gender balance within the board as well. So our statutes changed again, and now there's a requirement that 30% of our board must be female. And that isn't a cap. It doesn't mean that only 30% of women can be on the board. Obviously, we would like a 50-50 board. But I think we've done quite well. And I think one of the things that's been good, especially in the UK for governing bodies, is the ability to introduce non-exec directors. So they don't have, those individuals are independent. They don't have to be elected by the membership of the governing body, which can be difficult if you don't have a background in the sport, or you're not a well-known figure and a face that's recognised. It's very difficult to get into the board. But I think with the non-exec directors, independent directors, the board have the ability to appoint people with skills that they have in short supply. And all boards do need to backfill with skills, because the skills are not always there, especially with the governance challenges now today. The boards, they need all sorts of people in marketing, communication, legal, child welfare, for example. So these are anti-doping. So these are some of the challenges that a lot of international and national governing bodies face today.
Yeah. And I suppose, in terms of where to start on that, it can be quite overwhelming, I'd imagine, for an organisation. Just everything that we've talked about already, there are so many elements to diversity and inclusion that need to be considered now. Is there a sort of starting point that you had that you then built out from that could be useful for other people listening? Or?
I think it's about leadership. I think it's that the leadership have to be motivated to make that happen. So if that motivation isn't there, if it's not on the agenda even, then it's not going to happen. And as Aaron has said, it's not just about, a lot of the focus is on board, diversity within the board, but what about diversity within the workforce? I would argue that the workforce is even more important to have diversity there than in the board. The boards are kind of sometimes a little bit aloof and distant from everything that's happening on an operational level. Our board meet once every 3 months, and then they disappear again for another 3 months. I think it's the people that are within the workforce every day working for the organisation. They're having that interface with our membership, and also encouraging our members. We have 120 members globally, so we're trying to get them to adopt some of our values.
So I'm just listening. So I can drop off.
Where's that coming from?
That's Paul, yeah. So I think it's all about leadership. I think it comes from the top. If you don't have that push from the top, pushing down, I don't think it's going to happen.
And do you find that you are sort of being held to account by your members as they're getting involved? Are they then putting demands back onto you in terms of the things that you should be exploring or looking into?
Yes, some of the members are the more active members. I think with memberships you do get a mixed bag of very active members and some that are just interested in competition, and then you got others that are a little bit kind of dormant. You don't hear too much from them. So all the time you're trying to get that engagement with everybody. So that's why we're trying to get our operational team to reach out to our federations, and whether that be for officials training, and that's another area that we need to see more diversity as well. in refereeing and judging. Someone has mentioned coaching already. There's an underrepresentation of ethnically diverse individuals there as well, and also in senior management level.
Okay. I'm just checking who else we've got on video that we've not spoken to yet. Let's go to Matt McCann, if he's there, the founder of Access Earth.
Hi, everyone. So I said I'm the founder of Access Earth, but from it was founded from my own personal experience. So I have cerebral palsy, which means that I use a walking frame to get around. And growing up in Ireland, it hasn't exactly been the most accessible country in the world, and getting to travel to all these different places in the world, there are very few places that can be deemed truly accessible, if any. So the core of what we do within Access Earth is about bringing accessibility and inclusion from a disability perspective to not just sport, but to local businesses and the government, to ensure that every corner shop and every government building is as accessible as it can be. Because sport does not just start in the stadium. It's about how do you get to the stadium? How do you interact with friends during and after the game from a spectator point of view? It's how do you, if you're an athlete, what gym do you go to make sure that it's accessible to your needs? It's about that whole experience. And I think for sport to be truly inclusive, it can't just stop at the stadium or at the training grounds. It has to use its power to integrate with the entire community, the entire fan base. And I think that that's some of the fantastic work that's being done within Sky Sports and what's being mentioned today. But as always, we need to go further. And that's what we're doing from our perspective, is very much educating and changing the mindset of local businesses. And it's something that they've really struggled with, particularly during COVID. It's actually brought into sharp relief really just how important community and customers and people are to the lifeblood of local businesses. And the same applies to the sport, how important the fans were at getting people into stadiums. And really, it's not just about, the last few years have taught us that it's not just about going back to how things were, it's about learning from that and moving forward and making sure that we can include all aspects of our community and all areas of our community. And sport has a fantastic opportunity to do this. And really, I'm just delighted to be part of this conversation today and to really help to provide any input that we can from supporting local governments all the way down to local businesses with the help of inclusive data, but also including the community as well.
And are you finding that clubs are sort of more aware of this now and are coming to you proactively, or is it still the case that you're sort of having to go out and do that education piece for them even to be considering that?
It's still at an education piece. There are some clubs that are definitely going above and beyond, but the vast majority of clubs they're honest in the way that they don't know what they don't know. And a lot of ways when you come to them and say, you're not accessible, a lot of times they get defensive. And they point out things that they are doing rather than thinking about it constructively and how they can improve themselves. And I think I like to always go back to what Microsoft likes to term, they're not necessarily accessibility features. A lot of them can be productivity features. So, putting in a ramp doesn't just benefit a wheelchair user. It benefits parents with prams. It benefits everyone across the community, right? And adding in captions on videos doesn't just benefit someone with visual impairments. It benefits, people who maybe don't speak the language in the same way. So, yes, it is frustrating in a way that clubs aren't taking more of a proactive approach, but as I said, accessibility is a journey, and we're all at different points at that, and we're just here to support.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I think there's a huge business case for it. It's just, I suppose, looking at how we can get that across to different organisations. I think it's interesting when you're talking about shops and stuff. So one of my nieces has got cerebral palsy and she's got an electric wheelchair. And it's like people have gone to the minimum of having aisles for wheelchairs, but they haven't understood that if you've got a battery on the back, you can't actually turn around in that space. And that isn't a sort of criteria. So I think there's definitely a space for Accessor to be doing this sort of education piece. Daniela, moving back to you from a sort of United Nations point of view, obviously the world is becoming smaller in terms of the ways that everyone can communicate through social media and stuff. I think we're far more aware of what's happening in other markets. Denzine obviously mentioned changing the statutes to be less European focused. Do you think this sort of globalization is helping by showing what's happening in different places from a diversity and inclusion perspective and sort of helping us advance quicker?
Well, the 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals are for all people and all countries. So the beauty of working together and sharing good practices doesn't matter from which continent they are, indeed inspires and gives new ideas. And maybe we can find out that there are very easy solutions that we haven't thought of. Not necessarily things are that expensive, or not necessarily there are huge barriers, cultural barriers that we have to overcome. Sometimes a little change can really make wonders. So in that sense, working with the world, and what we are doing here is somehow spreading the voice is key. When it comes to the United Nations, there are a few points that I was listening and I would like to share briefly. Indeed, the UN in itself, it's a diverse world. 194 different cultures, countries, religions, and so on. So inclusion is fundamental. But in order to be able to work together, we have to have certain basic rules. Respect of different cultures, even sometimes our mimics can be offensive in one country and not for another culture. So this is why I think that even in the world of sport, it could be so important to have some basic rules to make sure that when we interact, I think of football, for instance. Nowadays, more and more teams of soccer or football have people coming from diverse cultures. But have we got some sort of basic standard protocols and rules of behavior in order to make sure that we are not offending the diversity of others, and others do not offend ours? So this is something I wanted to bring to the attention as a possible thing to think forward. Then the United Nations have also their own games. And one of the things I'm trying to do with other colleagues is to make sure that also within the UN, our sport, our games, when we have them on an annual basis, are inclusive of diversity. I'm working on that. So the UN is also an organization like any other organization. I heard about infrastructures, and that's a very good point. Accessibility of infrastructures from the architectural perspective, but also from the digital perspective when it comes to sharing information about sport and including everyone in also physical activities. Sport is many things. It's not only athletes, it's people. And if we do have good infrastructures, accessible, usable by all, meaning also people who have some sensory issues or cognitive disabilities, etc., or learning, dyslexia, I don't know, to read beautiful articles published on sport with dyslexia can be a challenge, or if one doesn't see properly. So to make whatever to make sure that whatever sport offers is really inclusive and accessible also from that perspective. And if we do that, these infrastructure, keeping in mind infrastructures, physical and digital, then we slowly through sport are making a cultural change. we change the culture, and therefore the behavior and the mindset. Behavior of people and the mindset of policymakers. We were talking about politics. So not only things can become more accessible in terms of physical accessibility to people with different reduced temporary reduced mobility. The gentleman just mentioned a ramp that can be used by many people. Someone who might have broken his or her leg temporarily, that's a temporary disability, no? Or pregnant women, etc., etc. So we've older people, the world is getting very old. So we have to think of that. Are we making sure that our infrastructures allow people to enjoy sport and they are accessible to people who are aging and still enjoy sports? And then the other one is the usability. And I go back to infrastructures. Are we making sure that in many parts of the world, when it comes to practicing sport, be that we're talking about sport at school or in other places, are we sure that restrooms, basic things, restrooms, are accessible to girls? It's a big issue. If you think of some countries in the world, bigger countries in the world, that are not necessarily part of the so-called industrialized countries, but here I'm referring to countries that are still developing their infrastructures, for instance, toilets are not accessible to girls. And very often girls skip school when they have their menstruations because there are no toilets. So what happens if they want to practice a sport, if they want to go to school and do their 1 hour of a physical gym or whatever they do? It seems to be a basic thing, but trust me, it would change so much the culture when it comes to gender and equality among gender. These are some of the examples I wanted to bring to your attention, that where sport can really have a huge impact. And that's equity. Because you see, I do not know what you mean by equity. I've heard using this term very often these days. But giving a very simple example, equal opportunities are when you have, okay, imagine me, petite. I prefer to call myself petite. This gentleman who's a big man, and someone whose height is in between. And we have a wall that is, how many feet are you tall? Meters? Wow, okay, nice. So say that we have a wall that is 8 feet tall, that is 2 meters and 50. And to all of the three of us, you give a bench with the same height. Okay, mine will have a ramp, but still the same height. Now, do you think that we, the three of us, myself, him, and you, for instance, will be able to see above that wall? No, he will be the only one. We were given equal opportunity. Equity is when you give to each of us the bench with the height we need for the three of us then to be able to see beyond that wall. And this is what equity is. I do hope you were talking about equity in these terms. Because if you were talking about equity in these terms, then inclusion, diversity, accessibility, falls perfectly there, and we have a wonderful puzzle. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got Keith Jones on video, hopefully. Are you there, Keith?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Hi, so obviously we've been having lots of discussion here. What is your perspective on everything that has been said from your organisation perspective?
First of all, I agree with everything, and thank you for having me. But I think the last three speakers, when we talk about race, you talk about equity, you talk about diversity and inclusion. What we need to talk about is where that starts from. So yes, we can have, in our organization, we work from a policy standpoint, community organization standpoint, as well as the club and league standpoint, because accessibility and diversity means different things in different places. It's different in Tanzania than it is in Chicago, than it is in Mumbai, than it is in Calcutta. So when you just heard about equity, that's the key. Equity and equality. Are we making sure that we're giving kids in school with and without disabilities, or girls, or ethnic minorities, the same opportunity to participate? It would be nice to be able to get to Man City, Manchester United, or to the Premier League, or to the World Cup. But if I've never seen a soccer player that looks like me, or I never had the opportunity to get to a soccer field or to the pitch, then how can I be involved? And I think the beauty of sport is that it is a reflection of our societies. So whatever change we make in the sports world instantly has a trickle-down effect on the community.
So we're getting tight on time. I'll just do a sort of quick whistle-stop round, everyone, just to think about in sort of one sentence, what more can we do to bring diversity and inclusion into sports? So I'll start with you, Keith.
Well, we can just do it. We understand what the barriers are. We understand what the potholes are. We understand where the resistance is. But much like SIGA and much like everybody on the panel, we have to be committed and not be scared to challenge people on their deep-seated notions about gender, race, disability, equity, and ethnic backdrops.
Great. Matt, what about you? Oh, jumped in the river. Where's it go? We'll go to Yath. Oh, no, he's back. Sorry, Matt, did you hear that? So we're just doing one sentence about how we can accelerate diversity and inclusion in sport. What do you think is the key from your perspective?
Besides not having a power cut in the middle of a live conference, it would be, I think the one thing we can do is to make sure that we're all playing on the same team, that everyone wants to have the same experience as everybody else.
Great.
And to keep that mindset.
Thank you very much. Yath, are you still there?
Yeah. I would say put it centrally into your overarching plan rather than what may be the case with some organisations, having it sort of as a bit of a side project. Put it in centrally, and then as a result, every decision you make will have that layer of it to it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then we'll move to the stage. Daniela, any thoughts on one sentence what we should do?
I'm also a certified journalist, and I used to work as a broadcaster. Media, the way we communicate, the words we use, the images we choose, that's going to be so powerful. And sport is fun, so everyone will be able to identify when watching sport in one way or another. So let's not do anything so specialized, although sometimes it is necessary to create even ghettos when it comes to images. But really, let's include everyone in everything, because sport, at the end of the day, is fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Dante?
Yes, I think it's unfortunate that it took the murder of George Floyd for people to understand that there is systemic racism in a lot of institutions, and it's now that those institutions are now starting to want to change the way that they do things because the pressure is and the spotlight is on them. So I think what I would say is that organizations should be more proactive than reactive. That's what I think needs to happen.
Okay, great. Aaron, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it's an internal audit, a DEI audit. It doesn't have to be made public, but you can't go forward and know how you're progressive if you don't know where you're starting from. So speak to your staff, like a staff survey, policy review, Yeah. Are you actually practicing what your policies are saying as staff, stakeholders? What are people thinking of you out there? You know, in the communities and other organisations. So that's all very important. Once you've got that information, you then start to see where your gaps are. And especially, you know, within that order, you look at your data, you know, your workforce data, like Denzine said earlier. Who have you got working for you? You might have loads of ethnically diverse people working on the front line and nobody in decision making. You know exactly where you've got to put all your work. And then once you know your gaps, you then work your action plan out. The one thing I really get annoyed with organisations is they do all these great campaigns, public campaigns. Look at what we've done. We've planted some money into a community organisation, and then publicity. Get back on the inside. Look at your organisation from the internally. That's where it's going to change. That's where you've got to start from.
Definitely. I must apologise. Francis is on video as well, and I've missed going to him. Are you there? Hello, sorry that you've been sitting there and I didn't realise, but have you heard everything we've been saying? What's your perspective in terms of how we can push this forward?
Yes, I think as involved, we are looking into advertising efficiency. So I think the very important message is about representation, right? So I think getting the right people, the diversity into the decision making process is very important. So because as some of the speakers said, you don't know what you don't know. So if you get just a very similar mindset of making the decision, you will never have representation of the different needs of different people. So I guess I think the importance of getting different people for the process of decision making is the key to make sure that we are able to create regulations and a system that is a benefit for everyone. So when we talk about the diversity, it's not just try to get different colors or gender or like different type of people in the house, but also like understanding everyone have a different need and decide or thinking about policy about need of for everyone. So it's sometimes very difficult to think about what people need if you are not actually experienced that. So the communication, talking about to the users, and is very important key to bring diversity to all the decision making that we have in the system.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, Afi, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with the notion that leadership needs to drive inclusion, diversity, and present those opportunities. But I also think that people need to be aware that those opportunities exist. Yeah. And people often talk about strategy in terms of either having a sort of top-down or bottom-up approach, but I think you need both. I heard this amazing stat yesterday from Kate Bevan that there hasn't been a female Formula One driver for 46 years, despite the fact that Formula One is open to both male and female drivers. I find that quite remarkable. You know, in this day and age, it's just something that just it's just shocking. And I think she's right that most people assume we don't talk about it. Most people assume that Formula One is a male sport. I think when the opportunity is there, we need to somehow push people into taking that opportunities. And there's all sorts of ways of doing that. I think media is a particularly good example. But it's something we need to be very mindful of. It's not just a top-down approach, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. It's been a stellar panel of everyone. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone else on the video. Okay, good. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks.